Your rheumatologist looked at your inflamed joints and told you your immune system was attacking itself. That is what they call it. An autoimmune condition. Your body turned against itself, and they gave you medication to suppress that immune response. Anti-inflammatories, disease-modifying drugs, biologics that cost more per month than most people earn, and the pain reduced, sometimes, partially, on good days, and on bad days, the days when your hands will not close properly in the morning and your knees feel like they are full of broken glass. Your rheumatologist adjusts your dose and says these conditions are unpredictable and fluctuate, and that is the nature of inflammatory arthritis. What your rheumatologist has never told you is where that inflammatory signal is actually coming from. Not from your joints, not from your immune system acting randomly and without cause. From above. From the organ that sits at the top of every biological hierarchy in your body, your brain. The same brain that after 60 begins to deteriorate in ways that corrupt the precise immunological instructions it sends throughout your body. That takes a protective inflammatory response and turns it into a chronic, relentless attack on the very tissue it is supposed to protect. Your joints are not attacking themselves. Your brain told them to, and your rheumatologist has been treating the joints while the brain sending the order goes completely unexamined. Today, I am going to show you exactly how that is happening, why it gets worse after 60, and what addressing the brain side of your arthritis could do for the pain your current treatment has never fully resolved. My name is Dr. Angela Whitfield. This channel exists to show you what a rushed appointment never will. Everything I share here is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for professional medical advice. Please speak to your doctor before making any changes. Drop your city or country in the comments right now. I want to know who is watching today. Before I take you through the brain arthritis connection, I need to reinforce the principle that drives everything on this channel. The brain first principle. Your brain is not just your thinking organ. It is your body's master control system. Every immune response, every inflammatory signal, every instruction your white blood cells receive about where to go, what to attack, and when to stand down. All of it operates under direct or indirect instruction from your brain. When your brain is healthy, those instructions are precise and protective. Inflammation activates when it is needed and resolves when the threat has passed. When your brain begins to deteriorate after 60, those instructions become corrupted. The off switch for inflammation stops working reliably. The immune system receives signals to attack tissue that is not under threat, and the result is not a brain symptom. The result is joint pain, morning stiffness, swollen, inflamed tissue that your rheumatologist treats with immunosuppressants, while the corrupted signal coming from above continues unchecked. Keep the brain first principle with you as we go through everything I am about to show you. Let me tell you about Patricia. Patricia was 68 years old, a retired school principal from Portland, Oregon. Disciplined woman, sharp, the kind of person who had managed everything in her professional life with precision and control. She had been diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis at 63. 5 years of methotrexate, 3 years of a biologic injection she gave herself every 2 weeks in the stomach. Her CRP, her inflammatory marker, was always elevated despite the medication. Her rheumatologist kept saying the disease was active and difficult to control and that they would keep adjusting the approach. Patricia accepted this explanation because it came from a specialist. But she had noticed something her rheumatologist had never asked about. The worst arthritis flares, the days when she could barely grip a door handle or walk down her stairs without holding both rails, almost always followed her worst nights of sleep. Not occasionally, consistently. And the brain fog that had settled over her in the same 5 years, and the anxiety that had arrived without obvious cause, and the way her mood had shifted in ways her husband had mentioned carefully, and that she had attributed to the pain and the medication. 5 years, 5 symptoms, 5 separate explanations. And not one physician who had ever asked whether the organ coordinating immune function and sleep and mood and cognitive performance might be the thread connecting all of them. Here is what the research shows about the brain and arthritis that the standard rheumatology protocol is not designed to investigate. There are 5 specific mechanisms through which a deteriorating brain directly drives and amplifies the inflammatory joint destruction of arthritis in adults over 60. Each one represents a failure point that no biologic and no immunosuppressant is designed to address at its source. Mechanism number 1, microglial activation and the systemic inflammatory cascade. Inside your brain live specialized immune cells called microglia. In a healthy brain, microglia are the brain's maintenance crew. They clear cellular debris, monitor for infection, and regulate the brain's local immune environment. When the brain begins to deteriorate, when neuroinflammation sets in from chronic sleep disruption, oxidative stress, or the early changes of cognitive aging, microglia become chronically activated. They shift from maintenance mode into a continuous inflammatory state, and in that state, they release a cascade of inflammatory signaling molecules called cytokines into the systemic circulation. Specifically, interleukin-1 beta, interleukin-6, and tumor necrosis factor alpha. These are the exact same cytokines that drive the joint destruction of rheumatoid arthritis and other inflammatory joint conditions. The biologic medications your rheumatologist prescribes, drugs like adalimumab and etanercept, work by blocking tumor necrosis factor alpha or interleukin-6 in the peripheral circulation. They are blocking the downstream signal. The upstream source of that signal, the chronically activated microglia in your deteriorating brain, continues producing it. Your medication intercepts some of it. Your brain keeps generating more, and your joints remain inflamed in a pattern that your rheumatologist calls difficult to control because they are looking at the joints and not at the brain generating the inflammatory instruction. A 2021 study published in Annals of the Rheumatic Diseases found that neuroinflammatory markers specifically associated with microglial activation were significantly elevated in adults over 60 with treatment-resistant inflammatory arthritis compared to age-matched peers whose arthritis responded normally to standard treatment. Treatment-resistant. The group whose brain inflammation was highest was the same group whose joint inflammation would not respond to medication. That is not a coincidence. That is a mechanism. Mechanism number 2, the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis and the broken anti-inflammatory switch. Your brain manages inflammation throughout your body through a sophisticated feedback loop called the hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. When inflammation is detected, the hypothalamus signals the pituitary, which signals the adrenal glands to release cortisol. Cortisol is your body's most powerful natural anti-inflammatory hormone. It suppresses immune activation, reduces cytokine production, and resolves inflammatory responses once the triggering threat has been addressed. In a healthy brain, this system is precise and responsive. Inflammation activates, cortisol resolves it, the immune system stands down. When the hypothalamus is compromised by neuroinflammation and the early deterioration of brain aging, this feedback loop breaks down. The HPA axis becomes dysregulated. Cortisol is released at the wrong times, in the wrong amounts, and with diminishing effectiveness at the tissue level due to glucocorticoid receptor resistance that develops with chronic dysregulation. The result is a body that can activate inflammation normally, but cannot resolve it efficiently. Every inflammatory flare that would have resolved within days in a younger, healthier brain now persists for weeks. Every immune activation that should have been short-lived becomes chronic. Your joints are not producing more inflammation than before. Your brain has simply lost the ability to switch it off, and your anti-inflammatory medication is attempting to compensate for a regulatory failure that originates in the brain. Mechanism number 3, sleep fragmentation and overnight immune dysregulation. This is the mechanism that connects directly to what Patricia observed. The relationship between her worst sleep nights and her worst arthritis flares was not coincidence. It was biology. During deep slow-wave sleep, your immune system undergoes a precise regulatory reset. Pro-inflammatory cytokines that accumulated during the day are cleared. Regulatory T cells, the immune cells responsible for maintaining the balance between immune activation and immune tolerance, are replenished. The HPA axis enters its lowest activity state of the 24-hour cycle, allowing cortisol to perform its deepest anti-inflammatory work. When sleep is fragmented, when deep, slow-wave sleep is chronically absent, as it is in most adults over 60 with any degree of brain aging, this overnight immune reset does not complete. Pro-inflammatory cytokines that should have been cleared are still circulating when you wake up. Regulatory T cell populations that should have been replenished are depleted. Your immune system begins each day in a state of inflammatory activation that the overnight reset should have resolved, but did not. You wake up stiff. Your joints are already inflamed before you have taken a single step, and the stiffness that takes an hour to ease in the morning is not simply a feature of the arthritis. It is the direct biological consequence of an immune system that never completed its overnight regulatory reset because the brain driving that reset could not achieve the deep sleep it needed to do so. A 2022 study published in Nature Immunology found that sleep fragmentation in adults over 65 produced immune dysregulation patterns directly comparable to those seen in early inflammatory arthritis, including elevated tumor necrosis factor alpha, reduced regulatory T-cell activity, and impaired resolution of experimentally induced inflammation, comparable to inflammatory arthritis, from sleep disruption alone, in adults who did not have arthritis. That is how powerful the brain-sleep immune connection is in the aging body. Mechanism number 4, neurogenic inflammation and direct joint innervation. This mechanism is rarely discussed in rheumatology appointments and almost never explained to patients. Your joints are innervated. They contain nerve endings that are directly connected to your central nervous system. And those nerve endings do not just transmit pain signals outward to the brain. They also release inflammatory peptides directly into joint tissue in response to signals received from the brain, specifically substance P and calcitonin gene-related peptide, two neuropeptides that promote vasodilation, increase vascular permeability, and activate the resident immune cells within joint tissue called synovial macrophages. When your central nervous system is in a state of chronic stress and neuroinflammatory activation, it sends elevated neuropeptide signals through the nerve endings in your joints. Those signals directly activate the synovial macrophages that drive joint destruction. This is called neurogenic inflammation, and it represents a direct pathway from brain state to joint inflammation that bypasses the peripheral immune system entirely. Your biologic medication does not touch this pathway. It cannot, because the signal is traveling through your nervous system, not through your bloodstream. A 2020 review published in Nature Reviews Rheumatology identified neurogenic inflammation as a significantly underappreciated driver of joint pathology in inflammatory arthritis, and noted that treatment protocols targeting only peripheral immune mechanisms are incomplete for patients in whom central sensitization and neuroinflammation are contributing to disease activity. Incomplete for patients whose brain inflammation is driving their joint destruction through the nervous system rather than through the bloodstream. Mechanism number 5, gut microbiome dysbiosis and the brain-gut joint axis. This is the most recently established of the 5 mechanisms and the one with the most rapidly accumulating evidence. Your gut microbiome, the community of trillions of microorganisms living in your digestive tract, communicates continuously with your brain through multiple pathways, including the vagus nerve, immune signaling, and the production of neuroactive compounds. When the gut microbiome is healthy and diverse, this communication supports balanced immune function, reduces systemic inflammation, and maintains the integrity of the intestinal barrier that prevents inflammatory bacterial products from entering the bloodstream. When the gut microbiome is dysbiotic, when the healthy community is disrupted by poor diet, chronic stress, antibiotic use, or the direct effects of brain aging on gut motility and secretion, the intestinal barrier becomes leaky. Inflammatory bacterial products, specifically lipopolysaccharide from gram-negative bacteria, enter the bloodstream. They trigger systemic immune activation. They drive microglial activation in the brain. And they promote the joint inflammation that your rheumatologist is attempting to manage with immunosuppression. Research from multiple centers has now established a direct connection between specific gut microbiome compositions and both the severity and the treatment responsiveness of rheumatoid arthritis. Patients with the most dysbiotic microbiomes have the most treatment-resistant disease. Patients whose microbiomes are restored to greater diversity show the greatest improvements in disease activity, and the brain is directly involved in this axis because it regulates gut motility, gut secretion, and the vagal tone that maintains the microbiome community through the enteric nervous system. A deteriorating brain produces a deteriorating gut environment. A deteriorating gut environment drives joint inflammation. Your rheumatologist has never asked about your gut. Your gastroenterologist has never asked about your joints, and your neurologist has never asked about either. Type yes in the comments right now if your rheumatologist has never once mentioned your brain in connection with your arthritis. I read every single one. Here is what you can do about the brain side of your arthritis that your current treatment is not reaching. These are 5 specific interventions that work at the neurological level of this problem. Intervention 1. Make deep sleep your most urgent anti-inflammatory intervention. Every night of quality deep slow-wave sleep is a night your immune system completes its regulatory reset and your HPA axis performs its deepest anti-inflammatory work. 7 to 8 hours minimum with consistent sleep and wake times every day. Bedroom temperature 60 to 67 degrees Fahrenheit. No alcohol within 3 hours of bedtime, because alcohol is one of the most potent suppressors of slow-wave sleep and simultaneously one of the most direct drivers of inflammatory cytokine production. No screens 1 hour before bed. If your morning stiffness is severe and prolonged, speak to your doctor specifically about sleep architecture evaluation, because the duration of morning stiffness in inflammatory arthritis correlates directly with the quality of overnight immune regulation. Treating your sleep is treating your arthritis from the inside in a way your biologic cannot reach. Intervention 2. Reduce neuroinflammation and gut dysbiosis simultaneously through dietary change. Extra virgin olive oil daily, because oleocanthal directly suppresses the same inflammatory enzymes targeted by NSAIDs through a mechanism that crosses the blood-brain barrier and reduces microglial activation. Fatty fish, 2 to 3 times per week for EPA and DHA that reduce tumor necrosis factor alpha and interleukin-6 production at the microglial level. Fermented foods daily, specifically kefir, kimchi, sauerkraut, and natural yogurt, to restore gut microbiome diversity and reduce the intestinal permeability driving systemic immune activation. Deeply colored berries for anthocyanins that reduce microglial activation at the source. Eliminate refined sugar aggressively because blood glucose spikes directly activate the NLRP3 inflammasome, the cellular machinery that triggers the production of interleukin-1 beta, the primary cytokine driving cartilage destruction in inflammatory arthritis. You are not changing your diet for general health. You are targeting specific molecular mechanisms driving your joint inflammation from the brain and gut level simultaneously. Intervention 3. 30 minutes of moderate aerobic exercise 5 days per week. For your brain first and your joints as a direct consequence. Exercise reduces circulating neuroinflammatory cytokines. It improves HPA axis regulation and restores the cortisol responsiveness that is failing to resolve your inflammatory flares. It promotes the growth of brain-derived neurotrophic factor that supports the neural health, reducing neurogenic inflammatory signaling to your joints. It improves gut microbiome diversity independently of dietary change. It improves sleep quality and restores the overnight immune regulatory reset your fragmented sleep is preventing. And it promotes the production of anti-inflammatory myokines from muscle tissue that directly counter the pro-inflammatory cytokines your activated microglia are generating. Every mechanism driving your arthritis from the brain side is addressed by 30 minutes of walking 5 days per week in ways that your biologic injection cannot match. Intervention 4. Address your stress and cortisol load as a rheumatological intervention. The evidence for HPA axis dysregulation as a driver of inflammatory arthritis severity is robust and consistent. Mindfulness-based stress reduction has been shown in multiple randomized controlled trials to reduce both disease activity scores and inflammatory markers in adults with rheumatoid arthritis through its effects on cortisol regulation and immune function. Tai Chi specifically reduces neurogenic inflammation by improving autonomic nervous system balance and reducing the central sensitization that amplifies neuropeptide release into joint tissue. Social engagement and addressing chronic psychological stress are not soft wellness recommendations. They are direct interventions for the HPA axis dysfunction that is preventing your body from resolving the inflammation your medication is suppressing. Intervention 5. Have a completely different conversation at your next rheumatology appointment. Ask specifically whether your neuroinflammatory markers have ever been measured alongside your standard inflammatory panel. Ask whether your sleep quality has ever been formally assessed in the context of your disease activity. Ask whether your gut microbiome health has ever been considered as a contributor to your treatment resistance. Ask whether a cognitive baseline assessment has ever been included in your rheumatological workup, given the published evidence linking brain aging to inflammatory arthritis severity. Ask whether your morning stiffness duration has ever been correlated with your sleep architecture. These questions expand the frame of your treatment from the joint to the system driving the joint. And any physician who is genuinely solving your arthritis rather than managing your inflammation will welcome them. I want to close with this. Patricia, the retired school principal from Portland. 5 years of medication that never fully controlled her disease. 5 years of flares that nobody connected to her sleep or her brain. She eventually found a physician who looked at the complete picture, who measured her neuroinflammatory markers, who formally assessed her sleep architecture and found virtually absent slow-wave sleep, who recommended a structured program addressing her gut health, her sleep, her cortisol, and her neuroinflammatory load alongside her existing medication. Within 6 months, her CRP had dropped to the lowest level it had been in 5 years. Not because they changed her biologic, because they finally addressed what the biologic was never designed to reach. The signal, the corrupted instruction coming from above, from the brain that had been ordering the attack on her joints while everyone treated the joints and ignored the brain. Your joints are not attacking themselves. Your brain is sending the order, and the medication managing that attack has never once been pointed at the organ issuing the command. You now have 5 mechanisms that explain exactly how, 5 interventions that address the source, and the questions to take into your next appointment that could change the entire direction of your treatment. If this changed how you think about your arthritis, please subscribe. This channel exists to show you what a rushed appointment never will. Share this with someone whose arthritis has never been fully controlled despite years of medication. What you share today might change what happens at their next appointment. Leave a comment below. Type yes if your rheumatologist has never mentioned your brain. Tell me how many years your disease has been active and difficult to control. I read every single one. This is Dr. Angela Whitfield, and I will see you in the next one.